Talk no more, none of that shit. I'm let shit saying it.
Let's go, hey.
Got me started, wrist frames carded, pull up double parking, don't even pay like I'm the owner, my young niggas retarded.
Yo, what up, guys? We're on the clock. It's Caleb back again with the 6-month madness crew. We got Julian and Cam. How are we feeling this week, guys?
I'm good, man. I got my temple gear finally. Um, Happy to rep the team for basketball season. Football season, not so much.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Cam,
I'm
how we doing?
chilling, man, chilling. Watched a lot of football yesterday. A lot of football.
Bet. Yeah. Well, today we're talking about a dominant football conference, nonetheless, but they're also one of the better basketball conferences in the country. We're talking about the SEC today. A lot of talent, up and down.
Got deeper. It's funny, the teams that they added, I don't think are going to be that good. But like everybody else that's already in the conference got better.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Well, if you're new here and this is your first preview, I would recommend going and check out our Big 12 preview. So that way you can keep up with the best basketball coverage, on YouTube, on Spotify, wherever you found us and are watching. We got information to provide. So make sure you go check out our prior breakdown. But this time we got another conference with 16 teams. SEC, we're going to start at the top with the number one team that we all compositely ranked, and kind of work our way down. And then we'll talk about some of our player predictions, and we're draft guys first, so we're always going to weave in some draft related conversations. But yeah, we're excited to talk about this conference. I can tell by our lists of players, this is going to be a lot of conversation, especially around the freshmen. And there's just a lot of talent. And speaking of freshman talent mixed with returning talent, Alabama is pretty sick. I mean, their roster is just filthy.
Cam, you got him where you got him ranked overall, Cam? You got him ranked overall.
Oh, they're clearly number one team in the country, right?
There we go. Yeah. I usually disagree with you on virtually everything, it seems like, when we have our conversations. I can't argue with you on this one. Like, they're with the returners that they brought in and the guys that they recruited, like they didn't even go crazy in the transfer portal. They're just
I mean, Cliff Omiori is pretty solid.
right. I mean, like they brought in guys, but they didn't go like crazy in the transfer portal like some of these other teams did.
I hear you.
It's insane. I don't even know who's going to play other than Mark Sears and Grant Nelson, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely going to be an adjustment period for this roster like most. But I mean, the roster pretty much like fills itself out with just the returners, including Omiori. Like I really think that they'll probably run a lineup of Sears, Diabate, Stevenson, Nelson, Omiori, and they'll play big around Sears, and they'll be crazy. Like that's a stacked lineup. Bringing in a Dan Holloway from Auburn to run your backup guard, stealing from inside the conference to fill out that bench unit or possibly start alongside Mark Sears in the backcourt. I think down the line is probably what's in the cards. I like it. They brought in a ton of front court talent in terms of youngsters. Nas Cunningham is going to be a factor from the wing spot. And I know that there's a lot of guys that you guys like as well in the front court that we'll talk about later when we're talking about freshman teams. But yeah, really, I think it's a complete roster. I'm finding it hard to disagree with Cam that they're the number one team in the country, especially seeing where this team went last year. And it seems like they got a lot better, in my opinion, by certain measures. So I don't know.
Yeah, man. Pretty much agree with what everybody said. I just think it's hard to find another team with as loaded a team as them. I mean, you're talking about what their worst player might be like Nas Cunningham, who's like an
Uh,
extremely exciting wing prospect on any other roster in America. So I don't know. I think it could be a situation where they hover around, 3 through 5 because of some weird losses, and maybe one of
I
the
didn't
other
even
Power 5 teams have
we didn't even talk about
yeah.
Houston Blatt.
or Darian Reed or Chris Youngblood.
I mean, we'll definitely talk about some of those guys, the younger guys later on. But like Houston Millette probably could slide in the starting spot in that backcourt, and that's pretty filthy. Um, yeah, no, they're tough.
They're disgusting. I think people underrate the Cliff grab. He's gonna be one of the more steady bigs in that conference, and he's already experienced. And they're gonna get a jump from Grant Nelson most likely because he's older now, and I just don't see how you compete with that night in night out for anybody in the country, even teams like UConn and Kansas. I think I think they I think Nate Oates might put together his best team yet.
Yeah, and I mean, it looks like it's only going to get better from here with some of the guys that they're kind of keying in on, next year and years going forward. Um, yeah, it just seems like it's kind of the beginning of this Alabama dynasty in college basketball, um, which is crazy, bro. Um, that kind of brings us, um, I mean, not really like a great segue, but I guess we'll kind of move on to, there's just so much to talk about with Alabama. We could stick on them all night. They'll definitely be deserving of, podcasts in the future. I think that they could definitely be a war room episode in themselves with all the prospects that they have. And we'll definitely, cross that bridge when it comes to it, maybe later this offseason or early in the season after we see what some of the rotations look like. But Tennessee is another team that could crank out some prospects. Maybe not the freshman talent, but I know I know Julian put Coach Rick Barnes as coach of the year for a reason. It was because of a lot of the transfer talent that he was able to bring in this year. Um, Julian, where do you want to start with Tennessee?
I mean, you basically started off for me, man. Like the key is the transfers. Like, you kind of saw what were able to do last year with a guy like Dalton Connect, and I think that they've brought in a bunch of guys who can have that level of impact for them. I mean, you got Chaz Lanier as a guard, and they brought in two really, really, really good forwards in Igor Milicic Jr. And Darlington Dubar, both from mid-major schools, and it's not like they lost everybody either. Like they're still bringing back Jordan Gainey and Zakai Ziegler. They're still bringing back Jemai Mashak, sorry. Like this team is going to be just as tough defensively as every Rick Barnes team is. And, I think they're more talented than they were last year. Like last year's Tennessee team relied a lot on Dalton Connect to carry the heavy lifting, especially offensively. And um, I don't think that they have a guy that needs to do that this year. They're just so much more balanced. And I I don't think they're going to be able to beat Bama. I think Bama's just too talented for them. And Bama can kind of do what they do just better with more talent. But I do think that, like, looking at the rest of this conference, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of teams that brought in a ton of transfers, as we go down this list. And this is one of the teams that always is towards the top of the conference that gets looked over a bit, at least by me, every single year. I'm not looking them over again this year. I think they're, on paper going into the season, I have them as the second best team in the SEC.
Yeah, I hear that. And I'm definitely on the same boat with you guys that this is definitely a team to watch. And some of the transfer prospects that they brought in from a draft perspective are really interesting, are going to be exciting to see in the SEC with the roles that they'll probably have. And I agree that there's not that kind of burden on one player on this roster that there was last year that I think strengthens them for a deeper run in March potentially. I still think that there's a couple teams in this conference that are more talented than them. And we'll get to a team in a bit that I think is going to be one of the better defensive teams in the country. And I just don't think that, this Tennessee team necessarily has like Chaz is going to be great. And Igor and Darnston are all three of them are like, I'm really keen in on them as possible, draft prospects. But outside of them on their roster, there's not a ton of guys that are going to be better than the even like 7 through 11 on Arkansas or Kentucky's roster. So that I think that that's what a lot of it comes down to me, especially on the defensive side of the ball. We'll get to it because both of these teams that I just named are going to be able to defend everybody in the country.
Yeah, I love
That's
Tennessee.
what it is for me. I just don't know if they have that juice. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's real. I think when you get to their bench and start talking about, firepower off the bench, which you need, uh it gets a little weird if you start throwing out, Meshack and Phillips and Estrella. You start saying those names. But I think a big, big X factor for them that a lot of teams don't have off their bench is the Cameron Carr.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be able to guard whoever they got off the bench, but he's also going to be able to attack them and, be efficient at it. And he's a big time athlete that's going to be able to affect the game in a lot of ways. So I think,
He'll be a guy that gets a lot more run this year and
yeah,
in a more highlighted spot. So he'll be interesting to see too.
I think what Tennessee's going to rely on though is pretty much that starting five being NBA like, um,
Mm-hmm.
especially when they just run Lanier at the one and Carr in there and in the same front court with Duar and Milicic and Agpara. I mean, that can't really run from them defensively. Can't really just pick on any of them offensively. So, and then Lanier is a legit NBA guard. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
already showed it in pre-draft process that he can hang with anybody in this world. So, and then the same thing with Milicic, who showed out for Charlotte. Just one of the more interesting bigs in college right now that also can defend, but he also can stretch you and he can pass. He's just a very great player in his role. And and then Dubar again, a pro scorer at 6'8", 6'9", can kind of do it all offensively, but also can affect the game on the boards. They're a legit squad. I don't even think there's pro squads that probably would want to guard them. So I don't think.
Oh, they have a ton of versatility, a ton of size. It's going
Yeah,
to be,
I don't
you
think a
know,
lot of teams in SEC have that five that can compete with that. But like you said, I think there's real bench questions. They need some step ups from some guys for sure.
I think Cam Carr is number one on the list of guys that could pop and potentially make a huge difference for that team. I think that that's maybe why I have him four, where I think that there's a lot more easier routes for me to find players on. We'll talk about. I'm pretty sure we're talking about Arkansas now. Um, I think that there's some routes for obviously a ton of players that I love on the Arkansas roster to become like real impact players in the SEC, kind of similar to we saw last year with John Calipari's team, not Arkansas, obviously, beating with Kentucky. What a weird move, right? I was thinking about it today, low key, like super strange, just like, you know, interconference, huge switch up. And with that, the huge changeover of the roster. Um, John L. Davis, Boogie Fland, Adu Thiero, Jonas Idu, Carter Knox, DJ Wagner, of Zvonimir and Bisic, just some of like the main names that they brought in. And the only player they really brought back that was notable was Trevon Brazil, who's kind of been a mainstay for the last couple years at Arkansas. Um, I think this is just, one of the more athletic, versatile. Like I think a lot of these guys can, put the ball on the floor in terms of like scores. With Flan, Davis, Wagner, I think that they have three of the better backcourt scorers in the conference. Um, in terms of just like getting after it one on one. I don't think that there's a lot of guards in the conference besides maybe Chaz and some of these like more veteran, bigger guards. We'll talk about Hogard later. He's going to be playing a big role for Vanderbilt. I mean, some of these guys are going to be able to catch some of these young guards on certain nights, but I think those three as a trio are going to be pretty filthy. And then I think you guys know how I feel about Zapata Mirabisic and Adu Thiero. I I view them at least going into this draft as top 25 prospects. Um, and that's kind of where I stand. I think Zvonimir Visic at 7'2". Um, just to start is a really, really solid shot blocker, has really improved, has shown a lot of improvement last year, in my opinion, in terms of getting to that point of being a possible like NBA caliber rim protector. But I think the stuff that makes him like a lineup changing big is his size and versatility on offense, where he's a guy that can put the ball on the floor in the DHO or even initiate in the isolation and create for himself and others. Grab and go in transition at 7'2" is pretty crazy. He's got pretty good foot speed. And then you got a Duthiero, who I think is probably the best rebounder in the country on their 7 foot. And just a pure dog. Supreme athlete. And I think that he's always a 37, 38% all of a sudden shooting up like from three. Like if he starts getting to that point where he starts being a floor spacing asset, he's a completely different prospect. So that's something I'll be looking for this year as well. And with that being said, I mean, this team's tough. I think that they are definitely like, I think that there's a solid like core four teams in this conference at the top that can all bide and try and like, fight for that top spot. I think Alabama, we all agree, will probably come out with it in the regular season. Definitely they have the returning talent and the veteran leadership to make a deep run as well. I think this Arkansas team, in terms of just pure talent, Trevon Brazile is a monster. Like in terms of athleticism, he's a full year off of that ACL. And he's completely recovered and looked really, really good, still dunking on people last year. So it's like he's a 38, 40% shooter at 6'10", too, and a draft prospect. So it's like this team's stacked. I think that there's maybe some questions in terms of front court depth, like a lot of questions. But I think that that's where maybe you look to some of these younger guys like Carter Knox to come in and provide spot minutes at the four, maybe. And I think that they'll probably be undersized on most nights. And that's kind of a scary thing when we're talking about, Tennessee. And it's been a problem with some Kentucky teams in the past in terms of, running out a lineup where it's like, Duthiero is basically your five. That's not going to work in the SEC. And that was proven last year. So that's kind of my Arkansas soapbox. I think it's like they have a very interesting dynamic of where they could be one of the best teams in college basketball or, one of the bigger disappointments. And I think John Calipari could be on the hot seat early if, all of a sudden this like experiment where this fresh look of a team just dragging all the guys that, were at Kentucky with him that were kind of not really like fitting perfectly with the way that he was recruiting, and then going and taking them to Arkansas and kind of trying to do the same thing. I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I have a couple of big concerns with Arkansas. One, which I think you touched on a little bit with talking about how some of these guys got to get the shooting up. I'm really concerned about the outside shooting. I know Thiero and Brazil can shoot it, but they've done it on low volume the last couple of years. And, I don't know what it looks like if they shoot the ball. I don't. We haven't really seen that yet. And I think outside of the two of them and Carter Knox, like the shooting on this team's not great. And I think it's been an issue with Calipari teams in the past as well. A lot of these young freshman teams that turn the ball over a lot, they're really explosive when it's working. But when it's not working and they can't get out in transition and knock down these good looks, like they really struggle to generate perimeter offense in half court sets. And I think that's going to be like another theme here. I do
I
think
think
that
Jonas
something
I do will help. I think Jonas I do will help with like terms of inside out spacing.
I
I
think
can put
something that can mitigate that is an experienced guard. So I do love that they brought in Janelle Davis from FAU. I think that's probably the most notable add on this team. Like not even from a talent perspective, just from a like he brings in the presence that they need. Um, I don't know. I want to really like this Arkansas squad, and like I have them at 4. So I'm not saying that I think that they're not going to do well, but like I do have some concerns. You did mention the front court depth. Like I do think that could be a problem in a conference that relies on big, powerful athletes to get the job done, and
100%.
on outside shooting in a conference where a lot of teams are really, really stingy about not letting you get the ball inside. So from a conference perspective, that like those are my if it goes wrong, that's why. But I think they're gonna make the tournament and like not do what Cal has done the last couple of years and lose to a bad team.
That's fair. Cam, any notes?
You're muted.
Wow. You guys are right though. There are some questions about projecting some of the shooting. I don't think the shooting is too much of projection, just because even if Wagner is still around low 30s, it's Flan's gonna shoot the cover off of it. Janelle Davis is gonna shoot the cover off of it. Carter's gonna shoot the cover off of it. So it's still plenty of options to go to. And then I think it's reasonable to think that one of, or at least two of, Ivicic, Brazil, and Thiero shoot it well enough.
Mm-hmm. I think Ivicic is going to shoot it incredibly well next year.
And that's why I was saying I think the front court depth isn't really a problem. I think they
You know
might
what I
have
think about? I
area.
do alongside of Ivicic. I think that that'll be really, really nice.
Exactly. I think they have versatility in the front court. They can run Brazil and Adu and that kind of work out for a little bit, but they can still go big with Ivicic and Adu out there. So
And they could go with a Thiero and Brazil and play small too. Like they could throw it like I think that they have honestly some pretty decent depth. Like I think they'll be all right. Like I think that they'll have a 9-man rotation that's gonna rival anybody in the SEC, I'm sure.
exactly, I think Carter Knox is definitely arguably the best freshman in that conference. So
Yeah, he's solid.
because if he gets going, he's going to affect the game at a crazy level that a lot of wings in the whole country aren't doing. I mean, his scoring plus his ability to play make with the feel, and then his size to rebound and defend, he's going to be a problem early if they can get him the ball. So I don't see them having too big of an issue translating talent wise, but Calipari, he's got to get it done. Honestly, like they have the talent though.
100%. And I mean, speaking of having talent, let's talk about this Kentucky roster as well.
Transfer you.
Jesus.
Coach transfer, and the whole team transfer.
I mean, just in terms of graduate student transfers, like they cooked. Yeah, I mean, they basically got all the best ones. And Lamont Butler, Jackson Robinson, Kobe Brea, Andrew Carr is a good player. Like, don't get me wrong. And Amari Williams is a crazy get from Drexel.
Yeah, I mean, they also got Kerr Kriisa and the guy who's my personal favorite, and Brandon Garrison. I mean,
I mean, then you could also even go to Otega Owe, who's my
yeah,
personal, and Colin Chandler, who didn't
yeah.
play last year, who's a really, really good player. He's a Mark Pope, kid was with him last year at BYU.
I have two questions when it comes to Kentucky. And like, I think that I'm gonna, I think that they will be answered pretty well. Um, one, how does Mark Pope adjust to the SEC? And two, how do all these guys adjust to the SEC? Those are my like outside of that, and I don't think that's going to be a big issue. Like I think that's why they're going to be one of the top teams in the conference. Um, but if I were to have any questions about this Kentucky team, that would be it. Like you basically did full sale, right? On the entire coaching staff, on the entire roster. They brought nobody back, not a single player. They had guys go to the draft and everyone else left with cap. So that's always going to be interesting. The only like I guess, kind of duo that they have is Jackson Robinson was with Mark Pope at BYU. So he'll be a player that's familiar.
And Colin
Yeah.
Chandler.
Right. Colin Chandler did as well. You're right. I'm sorry. So they've got
But
two
I
guys that
mean,
are coming from
I
BYU.
think I think that this team genuinely is going to be probably the best defensive team in the country.
Oh, yeah. And Kobe Brea as your, shoot the ball guy, you couldn't have gotten a better shoot the ball guy than Kobe Brea
I mean,
in
they brought
college
in
basketball.
the two best scorers in the portal, and Jackson Robinson and Kobe Brea, and then brought in the two of the best perimeter defensive players in the portal, and Otega Owe and Lamont Butler. Like spicy, bringing a knockdown shooter and Colin Chandler, Andrew Carr, like I said, is a solid scorer from Wake Forest. Like he's gonna be a good player on this team. Like they're deep. They have like real talent at every position. You know what I mean? Like NBA prospect talent. And I don't know. I think this is the team. I think this is the I will talk about it later, but I think this is like a team that could potentially surprise people and be the team to beat in this conference. Surprisingly dominant. I think they could be. And I think we could see a year where it's Kentucky, Alabama as kind of like the two most dominant teams. Um, in terms of like that's kind of what I see like an easy. I thought Arkansas could be up there in terms of like if their talent pops, like we were talking about, they could be really, really good in terms of scoring the ball and fast paced team that could, put people out of the building. Some teams like this Kentucky team, if Brea and Robinson aren't going, I mean, Butler's a great player. He's going to get to his own spots. Otega Owe can shoot it really well. We'll see what Colin Chandler does. He'll probably be more of a factor next year or the year after. But Amari Williams is a beast on the interior. They have a lot of like real players in terms of like how I view like prospects, especially at the wing spots with Brand Robinson. So I don't know. I'm just kind of trying to think over like I don't really see a weakness.
I think something you could look at with them is probably volume scoring in the backcourt, like because these guys came from Lamont Butler was at a high major, and then Kirk Kriisa was at a Power Five. So, and they weren't 15 plus point scorers there. And even if that wasn't necessarily their roles, they still, especially Kriisa, he definitely had the chance to do it. He just didn't do it because I don't think he's truly just a volume scoring kind of guard. I think he's truly is that kind of playmaking guard. So it'll be
Mm-hmm.
interesting to see. A lot of the teams in the SEC have, really lethal backcourts that can really fill it up. I don't know if that Kentucky backcourt fills it up, but the fact that they do have Brea and Jackson Robinson, something most teams don't have with that kind of size and scoring and movement
I
shooting.
think they're just gonna be able to defend it. Like they're gonna be able to
Yeah,
defend.
and exactly. And then, Pope's going to lean into that, defensive identity because that front court, with if they run Garrison and Amari Williams or they run Amari Williams and Andrew Carr, whatever they want to do, it's going to defend, it's going to shoot, it's going to be versatile. It's going to have size at like 6'10", all of them. I don't really see a weakness, like you said there, other than, it's a fresh team and some of the volume scoring in the backcourt, but they're a great pick to, be a top 5 seed.
Mm-hmm.
What
Speaking
has to
of,
go right, and if they're to beat Bam out for the conference, and I know it's a long shot, what would you say has to go right?
Just holding up in the front court with Bama and then being able to score enough. I think that'd be it. They have the talent. The thing is, Bama guards too, so it's gonna be a talent off. It's not really. It's not.
they're
It's gonna
big, but like
be.
there's lineups with like where you can run Robinson and Brea as your semi ball handlers, and then you can have Owe guard like Mark Sears, and or Lamont Butler guard Mark Sears, and I think you play bigger and have Owe, and he's a 45% shooter off the catch, like
Yeah,
he's knocked down. So it's like I think that those type of lineups where they get out there like five players who are all over 6'5". You know what I mean? Like I think that's gonna be tough against an Alabama team that's gonna lean a lot into their smaller backcourt, like with Holloway and Sears.
yeah. That's the only thing. Like we said earlier, though, Bama has the option to just do whatever you're about to do, but better. Because I mean, they still have young guards like not even young. They have experienced guards like Chris Youngblood and Houston Millett that they can just throw out there. And then LeBaron Philon, who's a 5-star freshman, he's 6'4", and he's a dog on defense and a monster. So even if they don't feel like throwing, Holloway and Sears out there against a big Kentucky team, they just throw a Youngblood or Houston Millett out there with whatever wing they want and they still
Mhm.
can go toe to toe with anybody in the country, big man wise. So I just don't see them really challenging Bama. Like I don't see them splitting with Bama, but I definitely can see them, sneaking one in the postseason tournament for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Bama's gonna be dominant, but I think Kentucky should be pretty good. I think they'll be better than Tennessee.
I could see that. I could see that just because they be way more deeper.
Yeah, I think that they'll be better than Tennessee.
There's a good chance Chaz Lanier, destroys them though.
100%. So same with Igor. Igor could give their front court headaches.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I think Miles Kelly destroys all of them.
a team that won't be
Yeah,
getting front.
pop that Miles Kelly North Side of Atlanta stuff though.
It's my segue,
team,
boys.
team that won't get caught, you know, kind of weak in the front court is Auburn with Johnny Broom.
They got some dogs, man. I mentioned Miles Kelly in there for a reason because I think a lot of people are going to be wondering if, having Tahad Pettiford and JP Pegues is going to be enough. But Miles Kelly and Denver Jones are no slouches, man. And, that team, I honestly think that Auburn with Bruce Pearl just always gets it done. Like, I have them at 3. That's my main argument for them at 3 over Kentucky and Arkansas is Bruce Pearl returning players. Bruce Pearl gets it done. But I mean, on the interior, Janai Broom is probably going to be one of the best players in the country. And, I have him as the defensive player of the year for a reason. And I think we've seen in college basketball the last couple of seasons. I mean, we saw it last year. What did the two teams that made the championship have in common? Dominant center presences. And no, Janai Broom is not as big as Zach Edey or Donovan Clingan, but he can have that kind of you're not coming inside impact. And I think in the SEC where, it's going to be grueling on the inside, that's kind of what you need. And I think that's going to win Auburn a lot of games this year.
100%. I think there's also a lot of, like you said, returning talent, and Chad Baker Mazzara is a guy that I liked a lot last year. And then bringing in, guys like Miles Kelly and Todd Pettiford are big names that I see that could be possibly really fun on this roster, in terms of a draft perspective in the long run. Ja'Kai Howard's another one. I think I said previously that he could be just awesome, in terms of a role player, come in, super athletic, overtime elite, finals MVP for a reason. And if the shooting's there, I wouldn't be surprised if they give him run as a freshman. He could be a real game breaker for them. And I think the combination of having some freshman breakout potential and like you guys are talking about the returners and transfer talent, I think that they'll be pretty solid. And that's why I had them 5th, right below Tennessee. I think that this will be a really good team. Yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah, they're pretty overrated. I think I got destroyed actually on Twitter for not having them top 5 in the conference. I think they're definitely a candidate to fall to the 10th seed because everybody else is just very good.
I think that's super valid. I mean, as good as Broom is, he's not Zach Edey or Donovan Clingan. You know what I mean? There is a reason why those guys were top 10 picks in the NBA draft and he wasn't. You know what I mean? So it's I think it will be interesting to see where they kind of fall, like you're saying.
Yeah, Miles Kelly, he already was in the Power 5 and had his chance to be a 20-point guy. Did not do it. So, and wasn't very efficient at all at no level. So it kind of, if he goes to Auburn, he's got to really flip his script and then have the mold to getting Pettiford, Puegas, and
I can't believe they lost
touches.
Holloway. That was a move that I forgot about until today when I was prepping. Because I was excited for the Ben Holloway led Auburn team potentially. And we're not going to get that now.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't even know if it's guaranteed. He just gets a bunch of burn on Bama with all those guards. So
Bama hoarding him to sit on the bench and actively making Auburn worse is the
It's a
ultimate
great
petty.
move because Auburn could have been a really, really good team, I think, with another dynamic guard.
Yeah, I'm worried about the size of some of their guards. I know Mark Sears is great, but he's, the best guard in the conference. And I think that's kind of my concern with Auburn, as alongside like front court wise outside of Broome, I don't think their depth is that great. Like I know Mazar is great, but I might be, doing some reflection and rethinking my Auburn top three in the conference pick. Because the more that I look at the roster, the less convinced I am, especially after going over Arkansas and Kentucky. Like they will shoot the ball, I think, pretty well, but I don't know how they defend some of these other teams, man. I don't.
I mean, I think it's weird that we kind of just put Chad Baker in that 4-man role, like he's just a true 4-man. Who else is going to be in the front court for these guys when there's, you already ran through every team we just ran through has a legit front court to attack you with. So, Miles Kelly and Denver Jones, I think, and Todd Pettiford, they're going to have to do a lot of scoring. Because I don't know how special JP Pegas is about to look in this conference. Uh, because you got to have some real burst in this conference. I feel like and some real creativity to really look like something that you look like in the SoCon wherever you came from. But they definitely have the perimeter talent to just scare you, and then they have arguably one of the best bigs in the country. So I don't know. I don't know if you can't be too down on them. And Bruce Pearl can definitely coach. So I would like to point out real quick, dark horse sleeper freshman Jakai Howard. He he could really get some burn because they really don't have too much to just throw at you in the front court. And
Yeah, that's what I was just saying with the overtime elite MVP.
yeah, I mean he upped his script as far as shooting. Getting way more efficient levels playing OTE, and he's already an insane athlete. But then, playing OTE, he's shown how to connect and cut and just be a really good wing off ball wing. So I think that kind of player that adds to winning. And I think if you have all that other experience and scoring already, and you have that kind of player coming off your bench, that's when you can start stringing together some real conference wins. So I don't think we can count them out too much, but I do think they're a little rated in the fact that people think they're just up there with Auburn and I mean not Auburn, but Alabama and even just the Arkansas and Kentucky's. So that's how I feel.
100%. Moving on to Florida. Um, this team is really talented as well. They're also a really, really, really big team. Um, with a ton of talent on this roster. Honestly, might like this team better than Auburn.
Now you guys see why I have Florida ranked over Auburn.
I don't believe in the coaching.
Yeah, Julian, he just has no real genuine reason why.
That's I think that's a legitimate thing. Like
Man, coaches figure it out all the time.
when has Todd Golden figured it out with this Florida team though?
Look, man, you put together.
Last year,
They didn't make the tournament last year. It's not figuring it out.
I'm pretty sure they did.
No.
Yeah, they did.
Julian, you sound very certain of that.
In his bio on the Florida website, you know what it says? The first line.
What?
Todd Golden has the Gators trending up through 2 seasons at the helm, leading Florida back to the NCAA tournament in
They
2024.
played in I didn't even remember them playing in the tournament. Did they didn't win a game, did they?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Um, I mean, do you guys have a place that you want to particularly start? I mean, I like Walter Clayton a lot. Obviously, coming back is a good player. Like a Handclotten, solid. Um, Will Richards a solid guy. I think they brought in some good transfer talent with Elijah Martin from FAU and Ruben Chinilu from Washington State. Uh,
They brought in Sam Alexis from Chat too.
Yeah, he's a good player. I've seen a little bit of his stuff. Something I have to look into more though. But he'll be interesting.
They also have an extremely
Exhaust.
exciting point guard, Urban Klazar, overseas guy, I believe he's Slovenian.
Yeah, from Real Madrid. And obviously, I mean the 7'9" Oliver Rush will be hard to ignore.
You think he
Um,
plays? I don't think he plays.
I was just gonna ask that, dude. He has to get some minutes
No, I
at
mean
some
if he could
point.
have a game wrecking 8 minutes a game,
That's what I mean. They're gonna at some point, even if it's just in like one of these like buy games in non-conference, they're gonna throw him out there.
I mean if he's in somewhat shape, man, you got to throw him out there.
if he can move,
Yeah.
if he can, if I mean the measurements are crazy, bro. Like 7'9", 305, but he does not look 305. You know what I'm saying?
Has is he the tallest college basketball player ever?
Yeah, he would
Pretty
be
sure.
with ease.
Do we know anybody that's 7'9", like in the world? Is he the tallest person in the world?
No, I'm pretty sure that he's not.
He's the tallest teenager in the world.
Jesus Christ, man. I thought that was like a misprint when I first saw that he was
He's
seven
the
foot nine.
world record for that.
They got they have a lot of centers on this team. It's kind of crazy. Like I'm kind of wondering if they're going to run any two center lineups out there, or if they decide to go a little bit more guard heavy because of the talent of their guards. Um, but I mean, they got what, like five centers on this roster between Rue, Condon, Mitch, Victor Mick. I'm gonna pronounce it wrong. Victor Mikic. They got Chinyelu, and they got Handlock. Like they got five centers on this team. I think they're gonna run two centers, man, at some point.
Yeah,
Which
Condon can shoot. So
I mean, that in and of itself might be good enough to get a lot done in the SEC. I don't think many teams can run out two 7-footers. Like even with all the size in the SEC, I think that's going to cause matchup problems for somebody.
100%. And they have, they have a player of the year candidate in Walter Clayton. He has the production to, get that nod. So
Yeah, 100%.
Man, you're starting to talk me into Florida now.
I
I
was
think
trying to tell
Florida will
you,
be all right.
kid.
I have them at 7. I think they'll be okay. But I have a team coming up next that snuck its way into the spot on our composite rankings. Besides, like, no help to Julian with a treacherous ranking of 13th. Julian, what's so bad about Texas A&M this season?
I
What is
just
so
don't,
bad about Texas A&M this season, Julian?
to be perfectly honest, like I love the backcourt, but I don't love the rest of the roster. I just like
I don't really like their roster. I just think they're going to be good.
I don't think they're going to be that good. Like I mean, I understand why people think they're going to be good. Like Buzz Williams, they've got two very, very good backcourt players in Wade Taylor and Zurich Phelps. I just look at this roster and I'm like significantly more underwhelmed than I am by the rest of the conference. And
I don't know
I
how.
think at some point the ball's going to drop and A&M is going to struggle. And I think it's going to be this season.
Never mind. I just saw Zurich Phelps 3-point percentage. I'm with Julian.
Yeah, he shoots 22% from three.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were wilding, had him player of the year, bro. I'm not even gonna. We might even have to cut that out. I don't even know if I can put that. But I
Oh,
will say, in their defense, I still had them at 6. I think that they'll be good. Like I think Solomon Washington has a chance to be one of the better defenders in this conference. CJ Wilshire is a really, really good transfer from Nebraska who's going to be able to get buckets with some size. I think that they brought in a lot of versatility. Guy like Jalen Lee is all right. Pharrell Payne's all right. Like they have a lot of like decent contributors that have like that are in that like 6'7" to 6'9" range, very similar to almost like a Big 12-esque. So I think that their front court situation will be very interesting. But like we said, I think that the heart of this team is going to come in the backcourt. I think Wade Taylor is more of a player of the year candidate than Zurich Phelps by quite a mile.
Chill out, chill out, chill out, chill
So I think that that'll be interesting to see. I think that he could carry this team well. When it comes down to it, sometimes in basketball, the teams with the best players win. And like I think that this is like a team in particular that I think could get carried by Wade Taylor this year.
I I
And I think they
understand
have
the
good. I
reason.
think they have good defense. I think they have good versatility. They have grinders. They got workers. Like they don't have any flashy prospects. Like I think this is the type of team that again, like in Texas A&M, has been like consistently all right. They definitely don't have like the Tolu Smith of yesteryear. Um, so that makes it tough. But like, you know what I mean?
I understand the reasoning and like it makes sense. I can see a world where I'm totally wrong, but I just think the SEC is starting to pass them by a little bit. And like just Wade Taylor and Zurich Phelps is not enough to win you a bunch of games in the SEC anymore.
Then what on Mississippi State is gonna be winning a bunch of games?
Better guards and a better front court. In terms of depth, not the
I'll
top
say
end.
I'll say about A&M. If Zurich Phelps can, kind of flip his script shooting wise from 3 point, they should be all right. Just because I think Garcia, Washington, and Coleman and Pharrell Payne, that's a tough nosed Buzz Williams front court that kind of shoots it because of Garcia. So that's the kind of
That's
team
the
that
name I
holds
didn't even mention
conference
yet.
play. That kind of team holds up in conference play, in my opinion. So, and they got CJ Wilcher that can shoot. So, uh, you know, that's kind of Buzz Williams team that finishes top 8 in a loaded conference. Man, that's just what happens usually.
I get
Yeah,
it. I
I
get it.
believe. What's up with Mississippi State then besides Riley Kugel? And I'm a big Keyshawn Murphy believer. Um, and there's definitely some players on this roster. RJ Melendez is really good. But I'm kind of sleep on. Guy Chol will be all right. They have definitely some size, like more size than Texas A&M. But what is like the key thing that you're like besides depth that you think is going to make them a better team than Texas A&M in your opinion? Because we're basically like flip flopped on our rankings of them.
Yeah, I agree. I just honestly like the total amass of talent more at Mississippi State, and I think they play similar styles of basketball.
I can see.
Um,
I think that we're looking at two teams that, like in the last two, that very easily could have one or the other type of seasons.
Easily, because I think
Where I was saying, like, with Mississippi State, I don't think Riley Kugel is getting it done in the SEC. Just Riley Kugel was getting it done in the SEC. He
well,
hasn't.
but Riley Kugel and Claudel Harris and a front court featuring RJ Melendez and Keyshawn Murphy, I think can. I
Are they
really,
better
really
than the
like.
Florida? Are they better than like the Florida team that he was on last year, though?
They're not.
That Florida team had multiple NBA players, but
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So it's like, what I mean? I don't know. I don't know what this team's doing with, you know,
That being no, but the thing is though, is I think it's different for Kugel this year because he's in a different role. I think last year he was kind of playing second fiddle, especially, once things heated up to Clayton and Richard. I mean, I think he'd be pretty hard pressed to not be the starting guard alongside Claudel Harris this year. And I think that's kind of where it's going to be different. I do like how dynamic that backcourt is in terms of they can do a lot of different stuff. They match up well against some other backcourts defensively, especially. I do have concerns about the playmaking from that backcourt, but like I said, like I think they're gonna be. I kind of I kind of see in them what you see in Texas A&M essentially. I think they're gonna be a gritty team that Chris Jans seems to get it done more often than not, and I think this is one of those years where he does get it done. Even with if the roster, like in some senses on paper, doesn't look quite as pretty as we'd like it to look.
I really like Mississippi State, man. I think what Julian's saying about the backcourt is true. I think they have a better backcourt than a lot of teams in the SEC. And I think they have a little more size in the backcourt that can support Josh Hubbard than some teams in the SEC. But that backcourt, I think Cam Matthews is still a pretty hard-nosed four. And like he said, Keyshawn Murphy, I think they got, Eric Payman and Guy Chol playing some five. Oh, then they brought in Jerry Fumina. So they got some options in the front court to go to. They definitely have one of the sweeter 5-man situations, so that definitely could hold them back. Because I feel like a good 5-man is less to hold up in conference play nowadays. But they're going to be able to score at you. I think they're going to be able to score at them, and I think they have plenty of depth that's athletic, and a good bit of those guys can shoot it.
Yeah, Cam, you talked me into this Mississippi State team being good. The more that I looked at their roster and the more I kind of went over it, I'm like, you know what? Like, honestly, I just see it. I hate it, but I just see it.
Right.
I think all these teams are kind of in a pack together.
Yeah. I think basically once we got past Auburn and Florida, I think a majority of the next 6-7 teams that we're talking about from A&M down could finish in virtually any order, and I would not be shocked.
I like this Ole Miss team strictly for like 3 players: John Bull, Malik Dia, and Sean Padula.
No TJ Caldwell, Matt Morrell love.
They're both like really, really good. You know what I mean? And they're buckets, but they're not the players I'm like most excited about this Ole Miss team. And that's why I think that this Ole Miss team is inherently better than Mississippi State.
100%. I think outside of whatever you think of Chris Beard, this is a very talented team, and they might have one of the better rim protecting 5s out there that can run for about 20 minutes. And John Bull, and they got some experience they brought in for the front court. Kel Brown, he was a very useful player where he came from. I think he was at UNCW, and that backcourt, they got some player of the year candidates. Padula produces. He produced at Virginia Tech heavily. And Matt Morrell produced last year. And he produced in the pre-draft process. So and then they added Malik Dia, another scoring threat. And I think a huge extra they added was Dre Davis. He's gonna play a huge role for them. He's gonna be able to hold up though in the SEC, in my opinion, with his length and some of his 3-level 2A kind of versatility to him. They're a very, very, very fun team. I think they're the kind of team that separates from the pack of whatever this Florida, Auburn, Mississippi State, A&M kind of pack. They're the kind of team that separates from that, in my opinion.
I think they could. I do want to say, though, like they're another team where the depth is a little bit worrisome to me at times. I think, outside of John Bull and Malik Dia, I don't see a ton in that front court. And Brown James, as you mentioned as well. Like starting front court, great. Like their guard depth, great. But I do worry a little bit, also spacing wise as well. Like even when Bull's on the floor, Dia can shoot the ball, but not a volume 3-point shooter. Like is a
we
good.
Forgot about Jamin Brakefield
from Duke.
Yes, who's been producing. So tread lightly.
I'll tread lightly. But I mean, I don't know. I have like those are my main issues with this team. But I don't think it's crazy to say they'll, outperform expectations. And I think Chris Beard, the first couple of years of his tenure at Ole Miss has been a bit hit or miss. But I wouldn't be shocked if this is the year where things really start to come together for them. And like they're a powerhouse in the conference.
I mean, they were a 20-win team last year, and they got considerably better, in my opinion.
Yeah, so. I mean, unfortunately, like 20 wins gets you an NIT appearance if you don't go deep in your conference tournament these days if you're a Power Five team.
Exactly.
So, they're gonna have to grind out these SEC games. I don't know that they can, but it's not crazy.
I just think Padula and Morrell are the kind of, gamers that get wins, against these Tennessees, these Arkansas, these Kentuckys. I think they have enough talent to compete with these teams. So I think they can get some. And then Dia, like they have the firepower to get a game off on these teams.
100%. I think that the team that's next has even more firepower, in my opinion. Um, Super, super talented roster in Georgia, in my opinion. Georgia's got a ton of talent. I'm a really big fan of a lot of these players on their roster. Front court to back court, I think this team is one of the more talented teams in the country. And it's why I like in terms of like pure talent. And like they have some draft sleepers in here as well. Um, this is a team that the more I look at their roster, I'm kind of second guessing why I maybe didn't have them above like Texas A&M or even Florida. For sure I had a Mississippi State and Ole Miss already. Um, but like this team's stacked. Like South Damari had a great year last year. Bringing in Blue Kane, bringing back Blue Kane, who didn't have like a crazy big role, but still is a really, really solid producer who has a ton of talent and flashes every time he steps on the court. So being able to bring a player like that back instead of chasing like an opportunity to become more of a sleeper prospect is huge to me. Those are like the small things where you win in the margins. Being able to bring back Dylan James, bringing in Justin Abeson, bringing in Asa Noel, bringing in Samoto Cyril. Like they're stacked in the front court. And then you also go get Savo Drezgic, who's a really, really good European guard, who's another like 6'4" or taller guard for this roster. They low key could really give Kentucky problems and Alabama problems with their size and their backcourt. And then they have the front court talent to back it up too. I have Asa Newell as the freshman of the year in this conference. I think he's going to be a monster. His tape is great. Like great instincts, great verticality. Like I don't really see a lot of players in this conference I think are going to have the opportunity to make as big of an impact as he can early. They brought in his brother just so they could bring him in. You know what I mean? Like that's the facts. Like I think he's going to be a really, really good player that they're excited to build around, and they have the guard talent to do so. Um, I think this is like a damn near top 5 team in the conference.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what Mike White can do. Honestly, that's my big hold up on Georgia and why I don't have them higher because they've had a lot of talent the last couple of years. Not to this magnitude. I mean, a lot of the names that you brought in are all really good. I'm really excited about a potential Samoto Cyril and Ace and I almost said Ace Bailey, Jesus Christ, pairing in the front court. And then the back court, they got my guy who I found from our sponsor, Cerebro, Deshae Montgomery. I will talk about Cerebro for a second, then I'll get back to talking about Deshae Montgomery. If you are someone who loves stats and you want to find stats for basically any player in the country, figure out how well players are doing at events, figure out how well NBA players are doing, college players. Cerebro has all of that stuff. They have their own unique statistic called RAM, which will tell you how well a player did at an event. They also have a statistic called CRAM, where they rank players in gold, silver, bronze, and that will tell you how well a player is doing in comparison to others at that event. So you could go look back at Luka Doncic's high school tape, um, and see that Luka Doncic, put up a RAM of 955 or whatever. And they also have 5 very, very simplified versions of the stats, which can kind of tell you the basics of what a player was doing at this event. It's a great way that helps to help myself scout and discover players and find really, really cool searches and stuff. And that's how I found Deshae Montgomery out of Georgia. Well, he's now at Georgia, but he was out at Mount St. Mary's. Really, really lightning quick guard, going to be a really fun pairing with Silas Demary in this backcourt. And yeah, like Georgia versatility wise and depth wise, like is up there with one of the best teams in the conference. Um, it's honestly just gonna be up to Mike White to get the most out of his talent. I think he struggled to do that at Florida at times, but you know, new year, new Mike, new blue, maybe he gets it done.
Maybe. I'm curious to see just kind of what the development looks like from some of these players. Like we are talking about, Damari is going to be really, really good again this year. Um, so I don't know. Cam, your hometown Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, I don't know how this happened where you guys are way higher on them than me. Uh, I just think they're too young and they don't have any volume scoring really other than two guys that came from a mid-major. Uh, LeFew and Montgomery should, help tremendously scoring wise. And I think they probably go as far as whatever can get out of Savo Drezic. So, but I don't think Blue Kane and Silas Demery being your two guys, just like how they kind of were last year. I don't think that gets you anywhere in this loaded
No,
conference.
I mean, but having a 5 guard rotation, all of them 6'4" plus,
Yeah,
that's pretty
that
simple. And
that's
all
pretty
of them,
sick.
all of them can create for themselves. All of them can create for others, and all of them have like a bit of like swagger and like flashiness to them, like each. You know what I mean? They each have kind of their own thing going on and way to get baskets. And I like that in a team. Like I like having like personalities in my guards, especially like guys that can go get after it. Like they remind me a little bit of like Michigan State like esque in terms of like how deep this guard room is. And, it's maybe we've seen with Michigan State teams in the past, no matter how talented they are in the backcourt, it just like, they end up falling up short because they don't really have that one true guy that's like a top 5 player in the country. So I think that that's definitely going to be like the telltale sign of this team is like where you said as far as like Savo, I think it's actually as far as Ace Newell is going to take them. I think if he's a double caliber player at the 4 along Samoto Cerro, who can hopefully put up a couple blocks a game and deter some of these major rim presences within the conference, again, I still think this is a really good team. And I don't think you should be sleeping on them, Cam. I think that they have a ton of talent, and it's a reason why that they were ranked so highly, nationally in the 82 and 72, like respectively. You know what I mean?
No, I get the appeal. I just tend to go for the more experienced squads.
Mhm.
But they definitely
That's
could
why
prove
you
me.
have Tennessee too. I hear you. At least you're consistent, Cam.
Yeah, they definitely could prove me wrong. And they're definitely the kind of team that'll prove me wrong. I just got to see more from that young backcourt and some projections from some of those transfers. Because I really do love their roster. Like you said, that front court is exciting. It's big. It will stretch you. Dylan James, another
Hmm.
another big that stretch you and play some defense and rebound. So
Athletic.
athletic. So they and a lot of them. And obviously, they're all the Georgia boys, all the Atlanta kids. So I got to root for.
Bringing in Justin Abeson, who is an A1
AFC
mid-major
exactly.
rim
Appalachian
protector.
State. Yep. So
Like
they they'll guard it. It's just I gotta see it. Typically young teams.
I thought Abeson was low key a sleeper like NBA draft pick out of a mid major the last couple years. Like he's really talented, and I think that he could be a major factor if Cyril isn't as dominant. I mean, if it's 20 minutes of Cyril, 20 minutes of Abeson at the 5 with a mix of Newell and James, like then you got that. I think that this like even next year, if that's your 9-man returners, you know what I mean? And I
Yeah,
think that's got to be like the main goal for Mike White is like almost like how Louisville should have operated with some of their rosters over the last couple years. Like, again, I'm bouncing all over the country with some of these teams that I'm trying to compare this Georgia team to. But like, if they're able to maintain their roster a lot more than like some of these other teams that brought in all this like, variety of talent. Obviously, LeFew and Montgomery are going to be gone. You know what I mean? Next year, potentially. Um, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure both of them are 5th years, are they not? Montgomery's a
Montgomery's a sophomore.
sophomore.
I think LeFew's a senior this year.
LeFew's a senior, but
I know one.
Montgomery's a
I knew one
sophomore.
of them was older.
Yeah.
I thought Montgomery might have been a junior or a sophomore because I know that's where most of your searches are built around, Julian. But Yeah, no, and I mean, even keeping Montgomery, they're going to run a 3 guard lineup probably with LeFew, Montgomery, and Damari to start the year with like Newell and whoever wins out in the front court. You know what I mean? So I think it's going to be a really, really exciting roster.
Yeah, I think that
Without
like they are going to be my fun team to watch for this year, even if it doesn't totally work out. Like there's so many
they're
players
more
on
fun to
that
watch
team.
than they've been in the past, like since I've been scouting. This is the most enjoyable in terms of rotation. Like I'm
Yeah,
interested and intrigued by most of the guys on this roster, which is something that I can't say about Georgia like the past like 5 years.
except they had that one year where they just had Anthony Edwards.
100%. I mean, yeah, but like I'm saying, like the
Like, yeah, that's it.
whole roster being something worth to invest in. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is a cool team.
Sure.
I think another cool team that's got stuff to invest in is South Carolina. I think that this team could be okay. We all kind of had them around the same spot, 9, 10-ish. Um, what is it about South Carolina that you're not really buying that much, Cam?
Uh, Not really a lot of volume scoring in the backcourt, and then the transfer they brought in is just an abysmal finisher. Really, really talented shooter, but he's just not a good finisher at the rim right now. And he's probably gonna be their starting point guard, Jamari Thomas. He was a great player at Norfolk State, but transferring over to the SEC, that's a big, big jump. And there's gonna be a lot of guards he's gonna have to go against. And he's only like 6 foot. They need some super jumps from guys like Zach Davis and Jacoby Wright. So when you gotta bank on jumps and there's no volume scoring and it's like not like you have a special front court and everything outside of CMB. I don't know. It doesn't really tell you. It doesn't really give you this idea.
Jordan Butler's an interesting ad. I think
Yeah,
take
they got Butler. They got Benjamin
he's a
Verdon.
good player that I have my eye on, low key
Yeah,
draft wise. I
Oki
think
Oku Federico is very very
that was the
talented.
next name.
Yeah.
So I think
So
that Nick Pringle's an okay player. You know what I
Nick Pringle's
mean?
solid. Yeah, like I don't know how far solid gets you in these areas in this conference.
But then also they have size at the guard spot. Even if they're going to end up probably just trying out a lot of different things this year, especially in the backcourt, like you're talking about. Like they're going to have to try Arden Conyers and Morris Ogusk and some of these guys and Austin Harrow maybe that are completely unproven. You know what I mean? And if they're not getting the leaps out of Davis and Wright, um, so it'll be interesting. I think that that's where we could see this South Carolina team really bottom out. You know what I mean? And it kind of just turn into another year of CMB being like pretty efficient, but not putting up crazy numbers because he's not a GG Jackson type of player where he's going to go get 19, 20 himself. I think he could still go get 19 and 20 himself. I think that he's very, very easily could be the player of the year in this conference. I have him as kind of like my second pick, like probably a more realistic pick over mine that I'll save for later. But I don't know. I think this is going to be a really interesting team, Julian. What do you think about South Carolina?
Yeah, I really don't love this team. Um, I think I like the guys that you mentioned that, can contribute right away, but you kind of touched on it. Like, I just don't know what their backcourt is going to look like. Like,
Mhm.
I get Jamari Thomas again, like, put up a lot of points at Norfolk State, but a 5'11 guard who can't get inside is not going to get it done in the SEC, like Cam said. And outside of that, it's a bunch of guys who have done virtually nothing. A lot of freshmen coming in. This is kind of a big turnover year for this team outside of CMB. They lost most of their star players from last season, and I have them at 10, but I think that's optimistic. I think realistically, they're probably closer to LSU, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt at the bottom of the conference when it's all said and done, despite having like a first team player of the year candidate in CMB. I think the rest of this roster, like, I don't know. And in the SEC, I don't know, and not top level talent, I don't know, is like a big recipe for trouble.
Yeah, I agree. I have them 9 just simply because I like them a little bit more than some of these other teams, strictly because I think CMB is going to be a problem. And I think that he's going to get them a lot of wins from the front court spot. I think Jordan Butler will take a step forward as a player. He was somebody who like had good flashes at Missouri last year. Um, so I don't know. Like you guys said, though, I think that this could be one of the bigger struggle buses in the conference. And speaking of struggle bus, what are we thinking about Texas?
They're weird, man. It's a weird team. Like
Weird.
I love their backcourt from a players themselves perspective, but I don't love them from a starting backcourt in the SEC perspective, like at all. Um, like they've got Tremont Mark, great player, love his game. They've got Trey Johnson. We'll see if they play him at the 2 or the 3. They've got Jordan Pope and Julian Larry, like great players, love their game. I don't know if any of those 3 can get it done. Tremont Mark can, yes, but the other 2, no idea if they can get it done in the SEC. And Arthur Kaluma is probably one of the most frustrating prospects to watch because he will give you 5 minutes of two-way superstardom.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, and then he'll give you another 15 minutes of non-existence. And it is aggravating because you will get so excited by those 5 minutes of superstardom, and then you'll watch the 15 minutes of nothing, and you're like, I mean, when is he going to learn to shoot? When is he going to stop with some of the unnecessary turnovers? I'm kind of getting on my Arthur Kuhn soapbox here a bit because I got caught out by him a couple of years ago when he was at Creighton. Um, so I love Caden
Caden
Shedrick
Shedrick
in the
will be
front
all
court.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Caden Shedrick in the front court. But,
Jordan Pope's
overall,
going to be really good.
yeah, he's a good player. But again, like him and Larry, like I don't know that they're gonna really be able, like they're not, Cam's talked about needle movers a lot tonight, and I don't think that either of those guys are really needle movers for me. I think it's going to be one, is Trey Johnson going to get enough volume? And two, like how far can they go if Trey Johnson gets them enough volume? I think those are the two like big questions that I look at it with Texas. Because if Trey Johnson is their leading scorer at 15 plus points a game, I think they can go wherever they want in terms of making it to March. If Trey Johnson's their third, fourth option, I don't think they go anywhere. That's kind of where I'm at with Texas.
I think Jordan Pope could do some stuff as their number one. I think that he's a supremely talented scorer as a guard. And somebody who I don't know, I think could be interesting in the SEC relative to like kind of just combating what you were saying before. Other than that, I don't think you're very far off. I think this team's a lot of unprovenness. Um, Especially like moving across conference is kind of why I had them 12 towards the bottom of this kind of clump of teams that are somewhat like interesting to talk about and somewhat kind of competitive, possibly like you're talking about with Trey Johnson. But it's likely just going to be a struggle bus. There's not a lot of defense on this team outside of Caden Shedrick and Arthur Kaluma for moments. So I'll be interested to see how this team, competes against like a brutal conference in terms of like just pure athleticism. I just don't know if this team has the like real like defense chops to keep up with it. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Cam?
Yeah, I think you're correct. That defense, banking on Trey Johnson and Jordan Pope to hold up defensively is a pretty tall task. Even though Trey is a pretty good defender for a young guy. Uh, Only thing is, Tremont Mark could help out with that, but that would mean one of them isn't on the floor. So it could be a situation where Tremont Mark is playing a third guard, and that means that front court is really gonna have to hold up, rebounding wise, rim protection wise, and they also don't really have a bunch of wings, to be honest. If any, they might only have one in Arthur Kaluma, so they're a little thin everywhere but guard. But I think Caden Shedrick kind of holds it down as a starter just with the experience. And I think they're gonna be able to hold up with you firepower wise, with
Mhm.
attacking you with Kaluma, um, Trey
Trevor
John.
Weaver had some good performances
Yeah,
last.
exactly. So, and then like you said, Julian Larry, Jason Kent, obviously Tremont Mark. So they have plenty of firepower, perimeter wise. It's just how much can they hold up depth wise, and how much can they really defend. But I think Trey Johnson, he could explode enough to make it really hard for you to guard them as a team. He can really pass it too. So if he can really lean into that and just being that kind of just put the team on his back guy, but Jordan Pope is still there to help him out whenever, and he's a killer himself. It's just gonna be plenty of opportunities to just win a lot of games that a lot of teams can't win because they don't have the firepower.
Yeah, I think it really is going to depend how much they lean on him. Um, because I think if Pope and Larry are your main ball handlers throughout the season, and you're running Tremont Mark as a third guard is kind of like a pseudo wing, or Trey Johnson is a pseudo wing, that's not going to get it done. Um, I'm not moved.
He definitely could be the super mids. I wouldn't be surprised at all, especially the front court. 20 minutes of Shedrick and Jamie Vincent, that could get weird.
I don't know.
Vincent's an interesting prospect though, so who knows?
I'll have to see Vincent. He's a guy that I'm excited to watch.
Yeah, so who knows because he has that modern big man profile that works out early if he's only playing like 15, 14 minutes a game. So
Yeah.
there,
It'll be
it's
interesting.
a big coaching job for sure, super big coaching job.
Hmm. Speaking of big coaching jobs, Missouri is definitely a team that Dennis Gates is going to have to try and put together.
This is arguably one of the most talented teams in the conference. They're deep, deep, deep. Uh,
100%. I mean, in terms of like size,
yeah,
like yeah, they're good. My favorite freshman in the conference, maybe not like in terms of like most talented or going to be the best player, but definitely in terms of like under the radar draft prospects is Trent Burns.
it's okay. Yeah, I was gonna say Boateng. A lot of people love Anwar Boateng.
And our Boateng is going to be really good. But I think Trent Burns at listed at 7'5", but I think closer to 7'3", is going to be really, really interesting as a footer who has some touch and can stretch the floor as well as be a dominant shot blocker on the inside. I think he'll be really interesting to watch and see how much they play him. Like you said, Boateng, Marcus Allen, um, and even like friggin' Aiden Shaw is nice. Like they have a lot of like bigger guards that they're bringing in and like recirculating into their lineups. Tamar Bates is even a bigger guard. So I don't know. I like this Missouri team. I think that they'll be better um, than Texas and Ole Miss and Mississippi State, some of the teams that we've previously talked about, because I think that they do have a lot of size, athleticism, and like Cam was saying, I think that this is a really deep team. Trent Pierce on their page is listed at as a 6'10" guard slash forward. So I mean that's just like the type of versatility you're getting from a lot of the rotation. And we haven't even talked about Mark Mitchell, who I think for like is one of the more unappreciated glue guys in the country at Duke the last couple of years. Definitely has not shot the ball ever. And it's just like a frustrating thing to watch a guy who has everything that you want in a modern NBA power forward, except for the ability to stretch the floor. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can finally tap into that this year and become, the perfect player that we all want him to be. And if that happens, I think Mark Mitchell pops and is a shooter. This team could
Yeah,
be they could be spicy in the SEC.
I think for them, the big thing is if the transfers pop. Like Tamar Bates, Caleb Grill, Mark Mitchell, and Marcus Warwick. I almost said Warwick. Like need to be a big presence on this Mizzou team for them to go anywhere, I think. Because a lot of it's surrounded by youth, and that's great. Like all the guys that you mentioned that they brought in as young talent are phenomenal. But, in college basketball, a lot of times it comes down to the experience. And I love those players. But, like, I do have some concerns as to, like, will Mark Mitchell shoot the ball? You know, will Warwick and Caleb Grill be able to do enough? Like, what is Anor Boateng's role going to be? How much time does Trent Burns have? And I think they just have so many. They're another team that just has so many questions on the roster. And they were also a train wreck last season. So it's tough for me to take a Mizzou team that has just as many questions as last year and really say that they're going to like jump up the conference. That's kind of where I'm at.
That's valid. I hear you. I think that some of the questions that you have maybe are a little overblown in terms of like where some of like the guard continuity is going to come from. Tamar Bates was a really, really big presence for them and a steady presence for them last year. And I think that he'll come back and be even better this season. He's somebody that's gotten better every single year, even going back to Indiana. So I'm really confident in his ability. Like you said, though, bringing in Anthony Robinson the second from Florida State, who's a really talented player, Marcus Warwick from Northern Kentucky, some guys that like, they're gonna have to integrate. But like this team has just as much talent as like, Florida, Auburn, Texas. They have probably more talent than Texas A&M in terms of like potential.
Yeah, I think they around the head guys. I think they're just super talented, but they have some real questions as far as projecting a team up, especially from being absolutely terrible in a conference and being better than a team like Florida or A&M. That's a big jump, and you're also relying on transfer up guys like Warwick and Cruz. Cruz is going to be a huge transfer up guy because he had just a beautiful year at UT Martin. Just that scoring kind of forward, but
Mhm.
will
It'll
that
be
translate
interesting
to
at the
SEC?
three spot as a bench player to go turn to when Tamar Bates is out. Because I think they'll run Bates at the three. And I think that they'll really try and get Warwick going early. And
Yeah,
I think that's what it's going to go down to. They tried to do a similar thing with Mosley a couple years ago where they really tried to run the team through him early. I think they'll try to do something similar with Warwick. And it'll be just, whether the talent checks out or not. But I think that, like I said, I think a big game changer for them and somebody that they haven't had in previous years is a Trent Burns, a guy who's this giant, guy who's a rim presence on defense and offense, but also can space the floor for you a little bit. I think it's going to be really interesting to see with this roster. Because Trent Pierce can also, sit in the corner a little bit. He's not going to be he's a guy who, yes, is not necessarily a shooter, but he's not an incapable player from the perimeter to make plays and put the ball on the floor. So I think it'll be interesting to see what they look like this season.
yeah. I think if you bank on Mizzou working out, you really bank on that depth and them having just so many options at every position. They don't only have Burns at the five. They have Josh Gray.
Mm-hmm.
They have one more,
Solid.
Peyton Marshall.
Peyton Marshall. So they have plenty of depth at every spot. 1 through 5. So it's gonna be real big position battles. It's gonna be a position battle between Enor Boateng and Marcus Allen and Trent Pierce. So those kind of options, helps. But
They
if
have
you
a
can't,
lot of win options, low key. Their low key is super switchable and versatile on the
yeah.
wing.
So Gates either has to do a great job or they're gonna end up being bad again because they're so young.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that that's where bringing in a guy like Mark Mitchell really helps.
Yep.
Um, like we said, I mean, Tamar Bates is like and Warwick are both graduate or like,
Right.
fourth year, fifth year players. Like, so they're not necessarily that young. Aiden Shaw has been around for a bit. Jacob Cruz has been around for a bit, and he'll probably play the three or the four, like you're saying. This team's super talented.
Yep.
I honestly, this is my dark horse pick for a reason. You know what I mean? I really could see them being a team that all of a sudden goes on a run the SEC tournament, and we're talking about them in March somehow.
I
I
think so too.
respectfully disagree.
If Gates does his job, they should be a top 8 seed in the conference.
I think they could, but I don't think they will.
Yeah, it's
But
a big.
I see the vision. See the
I think
vision.
they improved though, because I mean they didn't
Yeah.
even win a conference game last year or something like that, something crazy. So I think they definitely improved to more than one win.
It's a low bar, bro.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of setting a low bar, we're not setting very high expectations for this LSU team, huh?
It's interesting because they could be better than we think they are because they returned a lot of guys. They brought Derek Fountain back. They brought Tyrell Ward back. They brought Jalen Reed back. And they brought Damian Collins back. Now, those guys didn't do, like those guys played well last year, but like they didn't get LSU to, very much. But I could see a scenario like third year for Matt McMahon. Coming over from Murray State, first big job, could be on the hot seat. He's got his guys in for the third season running. I could see a world where they make a jump and, rattle off 2021 wins. I don't think it's going to happen, but I don't think like when I'm looking at the roster now again, like as I'm scrolling through and kind of like realizing like, oh, they've returned a bunch of guys and brought in two experienced guards in Cam Carter and Jai Bailey. Like this team could be better than we think. Um, at least, I know because we all have them in the bottom four of the conference, which I think is valid. Like, they were bad last year, they were bad the year before, and it's, but they didn't do much to get that much better. But
Ryan
if
Miller could be good.
Vi Miller, who I love, yeah, he could be really, really good. So like it's not out of the question that they take a leap. So if you're an LSU fan, like there is hope. Like we could be way off base and this roster continues to grow together and a lot of these guys take another leap. But I just don't think it's enough in this conference, unfortunately.
No, not yet. They'll be good next year, probably, depending on what they do. I could see the seventh senior year or whatever. This like feels like the sixth junior year for Damian Collins. Um, so whatever he does next year will be interesting. Maybe he'll finally learn how to shoot to match the athleticism. That would be really cool. Jalen Reed, maybe he'll figure out how to shoot it. You know what I mean? There's another year for some of these guys that in their front court to like add some versatile stuff to make them like even more interesting. But like again, these are like projecting them to not even like this year, but next year to
Yeah.
be like more interesting of a team. Otherwise, they just have good athletes. They just don't have any, like you said, all their best players that they brought back in the front court were players that like have been notable in college basketball the last several years for players that are just underwhelming.
Yeah. I think Tyrell Reed. I got confused with Tyrell Ward and Jalen Reed. I think Tyrell Ward takes another big jump.
He could
I've
be
got him as my
good.
most improved player in the conference. You talked about the forwards that couldn't shoot. He's a guy who can, and I think he'll continue to display that and shoot at an even better clip this year. But I think he's probably the most promising player on this roster outside of the freshman guys that they brought in terms of like guys that we would look at from an NBA perspective.
Mhm.
Um, outside of that, it could just be more of the same.
100%. Cam,
Yeah, I think we just had to rank somebody low. Uh, there's so many guys, there's so many teams, man, and you say a lot of they're one of those teams we say the same thing. We always say it's this guy, these three guys got to get better and shoot it better, and then these three transfers have to come in and do and play up to two levels of their competition. I mean, how many we have to say that about five other teams? So I don't know if LSU's guys are stack up with those teams that we're saying that about, but I think numbers wise and athleticism and some of the key concepts of, you return your minutes and you return some of your scoring, and you add, impact transfers, that could be a good year for you. And that's what they did. Only thing is their front court is just such a question mark, between Reed and Fountain and Collins and with Corey Chest. Like, they just have some weird players they have to really rely on. But the good thing is, I think Reed and Fountain might be able to stretch it enough, and the backcourt can definitely score it with you. I mean, between Sears and Carter and Cook and Victorious Miller, and they have a bunch of scorers that they can throw at you. Jai Bailey, and Tyrell Ward, is looking to have a big step up. So they could, be a team with real firepower and just be able to stretch it in the front court as well. But you got to make a case for a team like that. So you got to keep a team like that on monitor, and you really can't rank them too high considering just the talent disparity between some of the teams that we know we're talking about ahead of them.
Yeah,
I
and I
think
mean, the team that I still had ahead of them is Oklahoma because I think that there's still some talent disparities there.
I don't know about that one, buddy.
can we talk about Oklahoma because it's rough.
Oklahoma, I'm really excited to see what their first like real SEC recruiting class looks like next year.
Right.
I'm really excited about Jeremiah Fears. I will say that.
Yeah,
He could be one of the better point guards, like young point guards in the conference, just based off of opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it takes for too long for Porter Moser to realize that the guards that he has out there and that he's brought in are not going to get it done. Love them to death, but they're not going to get it done. And Kobe Elvis and Duke Miles. And two, that he realized that Fears plays his tail off on both ends and is a really, really dynamic playmaker. And he's he's one of those guys that I just think is so much fun to watch. The way that
Draft
he plays the
prospect.
game. 100%. Like
I think first round potentially.
yeah, I have him. I think currently is sitting around the first round. Um, I mean, I guess we can talk. We'll talk about the rest of the roster and get into it. But I look at this roster and I don't think that they beat any of the teams we named above them. Most of them they don't beat once. Most of them they don't lose to by less than double digits. And maybe they'll beat Vanderbilt.
I think this team stomps Vanderbilt, except for the first time they play. I think AJ Hogard gives Jeremy Fears like the welcome to the NCAA type of moment. But yeah, there's really not a lot to talk about with this team. In my opinion, I think besides Fears, there's some young players that I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see about over the next couple years. A lot of like older guys on this roster, sixth year talent, fifth year talent. So I'm excited to see what a recruiting class with 5 or 6 scholarship offers looks like next year for Oklahoma. Like with having like, knowing that, okay, like I'm going to be able to go play against AJ Diabanza potentially if he's going to Kentucky or Alabama. You know what I mean? Or whatever situation if he ends up at Auburn too. Auburn's in that hunt. Like, so, that'd be a really good opportunity. And I think that you can get that now at Oklahoma. And if Fears comes back, there you go. You have your superstar one next to, and then they could go make a push and try and get some recruits late here in the process. But otherwise, I think it's really looking forward to seeing what this draft pick could look like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Oklahoma just don't got it to compete with the rest of the.
Anyone.
I just don't see how they compete with the rest of the league as far as just holding up in the front court to start off.
I haven't even looked at Vanderbilt's roster, really. Like, I'm being completely honest. I looked at their recruiting class. I haven't looked at their actual roster.
I
It's
do
nothing.
want to say before we talk, I do want to at least mention Cole Atack for Oklahoma. I think
I was
he's
going to talk about him. Yeah.
yeah. No, you go for it then. I'll give it to you.
I would say, yeah, cool ATAC. He's like a little like shooting stretch forward. Doesn't rebound it well at all, but can shoot it and he can protect the rim. And that kind of is pretty much the best front court player on Oklahoma somehow still. I mean, Mohamed Wade, he has experience, playing at Bama and stuff. So, but he's their starting five, and he's probably their rim protection, I guess, outside of full attack, weak side stuff. They just have a really bad front court compared to the rest of the conference. And then the guards can attack you. I think when they play non-conference, there's going to be some mid-majors. I think they're about to just get an easy one on Oklahoma and realize that they got to still guard Bryson Gooden and Zook Miles and Jeremiah Fears and Jaden Jones and Kobe Elvis. So they have plenty of guys to throw at you on the perimeter. It's just way, way, way too bad on the in the front court, and then don't really have wings either. It's like they have wings or something to help with that. So
No, it's like they
good
can't
guards.
even. I'm looking at Vanderbilt's roster, and I don't even know if they're going to be able to compete with Vanderbilt.
Yeah, Vanderbilt has a little more experience in the front court.
Vanderbilt might be.
Jalen Carey is okay, and I mean Tyler Nickel is a cool player. Like, I mean,
Stockton's all right.
talk about small ball, bro.
I mean, we'll see what happens with Kajani Wright in an expanded role.
In like they need him role.
Can't you say that about all 5 of their starters, bro? Like, please do something.
God, man, they're about to be. That's gonna be a rough watch.
You're watching Vanderbilt? All right, hold on. How many games we think they win this year? I'm gonna start counting up with my fingers in the SEC, not overall in the SEC. I'm gonna count up with my fingers. Tell
I
me
think
what
they
I'm
beat,
thinking.
like I said, I think they beat the teams with young guards maybe once. I think they could probably, I think they could sneak up on Auburn one time. You know what I mean? I think they have unproven guards, maybe.
All right. You think they win 2 games in SEC play?
No.
Can they win one? Can they win a game in SEC?
They have Jason Edwards now. They still have Jason Edwards. Okay, that means nothing to nobody. Okay,
They can.
He's okay, bro. He's a bucket. It's just like, it's like you're talking about this with the other teams. It's like we're having to project him from North Texas to Vanderbilt.
He's gonna start.
No, I mean the AAC is high major, so
yeah, it is.
It's not the SEC. That's what we've been talking about.
100%. No, I'm not saying he's going to be. He was averaging 20
arguments you want to apply.
No, I'm saying he's averaging 20. He was averaging 20 though. Like that drops is like still what 13, 14. That's
on Vanderbilt. That's on Vanderbilt. That's probably 18, bro.
On Vanderbilt, that's probably like 13 and like a really bad assist to turnover ratio.
I was gonna say 18 on inefficient shooting.
Yeah, you feel me? No, he's definitely still at the bottom 5 of guards in the league. I'm just saying they might
like starters, yeah. But yeah,
they're not beating like Auburn though. Like I'm thinking that.
I think they can beat Oklahoma.
100%. Like I said, AJ Hoggard's a gamer. Like he's a real lead guard, like real like college basketball lead guard. With NBA floor general chops in terms of running offense, getting to his own spots, punishing small defenders. Like he's really about that. Like he's coming back this year to make a push to the NBA. You can guarantee that. So it's like he's probably coming with some smoke. Tyler Nickel's a baller, another guy in a similar position to Hoggard, where it's like he's like looking to like, okay, like I'm trying to be Sam Hauser. You know what I mean? He's trying to find that spot, a good playmaker. So I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, like you see, touched on it though. They're tiny. I mean, I think Jalen Carey's 6'8" on his greatest day. He might be their starting 5.
He's like
getting at least 20 minutes.
He's like 6'6", bro. He's like Grant Williams size, bro. So I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. He's smaller than his brother for sure.
They're gonna play that roto small ball, man.
They got
nobody rebounds, everybody shoots.
Anybody a McLaughlin guy?
He's decent. He's decent. I mean, like they got guys that aren't like they have decent players. It's just
I think they're a solid squad. They just happen to be the worst team in the SEC.
Yeah, I think in the
Where do
AAC
they
they're
rank?
probably
Where do they
top
rank in the Big Ten?
Oh, it's still at the bottom.
10. They're better than Penn State.
No, they're not.
Maybe they're better than Minnesota.
No, they're not.
You don't think so? Minnesota's
We'll
a
return to
train
these
wreck.
conversations. We'll return to these conversations. We'll return. We'll bring up is Vanderbilt better than? Will be a segment on the Big Ten preview next week. We're going to talk about now kind of like our all conference predictions. If you weren't here for the last one, like I said, recommend going and checking out our Big 12 preview. So that way, this is more of like a draft prospect kind of focused framing. I think definitely it's more some of our like, you know, guys that we think could be standout players within the conference. So it's important to know that for every conference. And we'll start right at the top here at the SEC in terms of who we think is probably unanimously going to be the best lead guard. Returning for Alabama and Mark Sears, we talked about him a lot earlier. You know, a dominant distributor and creator at the lead guard, a knockdown shooter, a plug-in energy guy wherever he's gone in terms of role usage, minutes, whatever spot he's been put in as a player, he's always churned out, his best nonstop. And I think that that's something that as people we all can appreciate, and especially can appreciate as a draft scout to a guy who's returning as one of like the highest pedigree players, somebody that people were, putting on big boards. I think that he could draw comparisons this year with some of his performances to Jalen Brunson. Like he definitely is in that class of like small guards that can get after it. And it'll be interesting to see what he's able to do with another year at Alabama. I think that he'll be probably one of the like, in like that group of like that RJ Davis-esque, like, highly regarded like guards in the country, to probably all American. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up on those lists for us, unanimously all conference first team.
Yeah, I mean, he was at least, I mean, on here, he's the first player on all of our lists. I think, I don't know about for you guys, but for me, he's the first player that popped into mind when I think of first team SEC. Like, he was one of the best, if not the best player in the conference last year. Other than probably Reed Shepard is another name I'd like to throw out there, Dalton Connect. And like, he's going to be even better this year and has so much talent around him. A lot of times they talk about MVP being the best player on the best team. And that's probably what's going to be the case with Mark Sears this year. You summed up his game really, really well. He does everything you want your guard to do, and he does it at a high level. If Bama makes a Final Four or goes deep in the tournament this year, it's going to be because of Mark Sears.
Mm-hmm. I think that the same thing can be probably said for Kentucky with Jackson Robinson to some extent in terms of and Kobe Brea really across the board. We all have, them kind of on our first or second team. With both of them, we talked about them a lot earlier. Also making appearances. Chaz Lanier is making an appearance on Cam's first team and also his player of the year projection. Talked a lot about him earlier. Brome from Auburn, Murray-Boyles from South Carolina is a unanimous selection. And then I also, throw in there Zvonimir Visic, who's my player of the year candidate, who I can make a case for later on. You also have Darlington Dubar for Julian making an appearance. I think that the first team is kind of a toss-up. It's really like I think a lot across the board. We think CMB and Mark Sears are going to be there, and then it's really about what teams are playing well. For me, I think Arkansas could have a really good year, and Kentucky could have a really good year, and that's going to result on them having a lot of players on these teams. For you guys, it's Tennessee and Kentucky maybe not having as dominant of a presence, and Arkansas having none. Moving on to the second team. I had a Deuce Thiero. I've talked about him a bunch on all platforms. Walter Clayton we covered. Matt Morrell is on here as well. And AJ Hogard, Jordan Pope. So some veteran guard presences showing up. Clifford Omiori also getting a nod, as well as Otega Owe, Amari Williams, both getting nods from me. Brandon Garrison was one that I wanted to point out on Julian's. And I wanted to ask like what specifically you thought the path was for Brandon Garrison to be second team all SEC. And if that's the case, are you thinking that he's a first round or second round draft prospect then?
Yeah, I absolutely love Brandon Garrison. He's probably one of these big men that I'm just like,
You're gonna get caught on TikTok again.
what?
You're gonna get caught on TikTok again,
I'll
glazing some
take
players.
getting caught on TikTok for Brandon Garrison. I just love him as a pick and roll big so much. Like it's kind of egregious how much I love Brandon Garrison as a pick and roll big, and I think for Kentucky. They're going to need somebody who's going to make these big rambling runs to the basket, who's going to do the unselfish stuff, a lot of the dirty work on the glass and the paint. Because a lot of these guys that they've brought in are either catch and shoot guys who need the ball in their hands to score, not necessarily like as playmakers, but like, catch and shoot. Um, or are guys that are like initiators. And Brandon Garrison's a guy
What
that
about
does
Amari
that.
Williams? What do you think? Is he going to be beaten out of Amari Williams then, do you think?
I think they'll play them together. Um, that's kind of my vision for Brandon Garrison player. The lineup for Brandon Garrison player of the year. I said that. Second team all SEC. I didn't mean to say player of the year. Second team all SEC.
You're
Uh,
wild.
but why not player of the year? I'm just kidding. Uh, I'm trolling y'all. It's late at night. The case for him second team all SEC is they need a dominant rim presence who's going to pick and roll and run, and doesn't need to have the ball in his hands at all, and is going to do the dirty work on both ends of the floor. That's the Brandon Garrison case, and I think doing that, if Kentucky is as good as they're supposed to be, like he racks up some double doubles here and there, I think he can do it, and I think if he's able to play a really strong, version of himself in that role and display a little bit of touch around the rim, like I don't see why he doesn't land as a second round pick. I think that this is like a big leap to make with Brandon Garrison, and I'm fully aware that like it may not be for this season. Like this could be a next season thing. But I'm willing to put, my best foot forward, you know, throw my eggs into the Brandon Garrison basket for the season and say, you know what, like Kentucky's bringing in so many guys, why not him? You know?
That's fair. Why not? I can see it to some extent with the talent. I think Amari Williams is going to fill the role that you just described they need perfectly in a more of a bulk this year, compared to Garrison. Especially at 7 foot. I think he presents a lot more like size. Like I think he's gonna be like a mismatch in the SEC, especially this year. I don't think that there's a lot of teams that have footers that are athletic as Amari Williams and also have the resume and experience of playing not necessarily this level of basketball, but he's been around the block, and I don't think Brandon Garrison's necessarily like as savvy of a player as Amari Williams is. And I think that Mark Pope is going to lean on Amari a little bit more as somebody who's going to be able to do a little bit more on offense. Um, so I think that'll be an interesting narrative to see. But again, like I think across the board, Kentucky is going to be well represented at the end of the year. Clifford Emeori is a huge shout out. Want to give a shout out to him. He's a dog, just straight up like motor, like unreal. And I think that he's really been an underrated draft prospect from Rutgers for the last couple of years. And I'm happy to see him get an opportunity to be a premier piece at Alabama on their roster. They really cleared out and said, "You're our center." Like their roster speaks that. So I think that's a good sign for him. I think that Nate Oates recognizes his talent. And we're going to see a really big year from Cliff Omoyori in that Alabama front court. There's some other names, I guess, they're on the second team that we could highlight, like Igor Milicic, we mentioned earlier. It could have like a Dalton Connect. Same thing with Chasnier, both like Don Stobar, all guys from Tennessee that could have Dalton Connect-esque, transfer up outbursts, I guess you would say. And I think that that'll be interesting to monitor now for Tennessee year to year. Um, Jordan Pope and AJ Hogard both getting the second team nods from you, Julian, are fun, as well as Mark Mitchell. I think that those are all very optimistic, but I like it.
Yeah, the reasoning behind it, I will explain myself before we move on. Um, Bad teams, big numbers. With Mark Mitchell, it's a please shoot the ball and you'll be on the second team.
Yeah. The freshman team is kind of the similar as the second team, is it's really just like a mixed bag of guys all across. Um, Myself, I really, like I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Asa Newell. Um, we talked about Trey Johnson as a scorer and just overall wing prospect is going to be really fun to watch. I think that he's a lottery prospect in my eyes, for the most part, in terms of like pedigree as a scorer and all around player. Like Cam really highlighted really well as somebody who, also can distribute the ball. And when he does that, he can be a really game changer, as like a high usage guy. So I think that that's fun as a freshman. I think Carter Knox could do a similar thing in a maybe a lesser role for Arkansas. And like I said before, Trent Burns is a sleeper for Missouri. But I know that we have talked a lot about Alabama, but I know we mentioned briefly they have a ton of freshman talent that they brought in that may not get highlighted a ton individually. So that's why I want to put all three of them in a clump. The three of my favorites is Nas Cunningham, Aiden Sherrill, and Darion Reed, as three guys that all have plus positional size, have some like developing NBA skill, and also are all pretty athletic and long. I think that it's going to be interesting to see how they're all utilized and which one of them pops. And then there's also some other players for Alabama that I think can also pop as well, that are returners that are really good. So it'll be interesting to see, um, which one of these guys. I think it's going to be Reed. And Julian, yeah, I know that you can probably agree with that. I think that he presents a little bit more of the versatility that's going to be more fun. Where Sherrill is just kind of bigger.
Yeah, it's the versatility of the shooting and the not needing to have the ball in his hands, which I think is going to be big for Alabama. Nas
Mhm.
kind of needs to have the ball in his hands a little bit more, even though I do love him as a prospect.
100%. Cam, who are you digging freshman wise as well?
I think like I said before, Carter Knox probably has a great chance of being best freshman, or Trey Johnson. Those are probably my two favorites. I really like the bigs. I really like how the bigs are some of the best bigs in the conference overall, like John Bull and Santos Cyril. Uh, if you look at some of the starting fives in the conference, a lot of them aren't as talented as those two. And I think they could make a push to be top five bigs in the conference and really propel their teams and get their teams some wins. So I'm really excited to see what they do. Uh, I think we talked about earlier with Oklahoma, cool attack. He's gonna be in a much needed situation. I don't think he's like just a super special talent compared to some of these guys, but usage, like I always say, is the best developer. And I think if he gets a bunch of minutes, 20 plus, he could develop super fast. And you know the draft Twitter world and just the draft world period just loves the analytical darlings that shoot it well and can kind of either rebound it or defend the rim well. So those are kind of some of my favorite guys, though.
100%. For me, favorite guys in this conference starts and ends with Zvonimir Visic.
Here it comes, boys.
These are my favorite too.
I
Seven
love
foot
Savon
two,
Bear as well.
does a little bit of everything. I think in terms of player of the year, he's not going to win it. I think there's a I mean, I wouldn't bet on it if I were you. Be a really dumb bet. And a really bad pick and like a number one overall pick in like a dynasty draft. Um, that's beyond the point. Like
Like,
Zvonimir Micic, though, has an opportunity, I think, to play a huge role on whether Arkansas is a good basketball team or not. And that's why I'm picking him as the player of the year for Arkansas specifically. And I think that he could be also the most interesting draft prospect in the conference. I think both of those things combined warrant this selection. And then he's also my favorite player in the country. Ha ha. So I think he's going to be dope though. Like so, like in a full year of Zvonimir Visic, obviously he had to sit a couple games, like I think 6, 7. Due to just like a weight on his transfer. So once he got in and adjusted though, he was able to actually have a couple really, really big games. One of them being against Alabama. And another big game against Georgia as well. Some of the better teams last year in terms of like attacking the basket from multiple spots on the floor, and he held his own in terms of defending at the rim. While at Kentucky, obviously. So I'll be interested to see um how he plays more, maybe a little bit more four if he's playing like in terms of like offensive role. I'll look forward to seeing more of him on the perimeter. And I think that he provides at 7'2" these like simple possessions and mismatches where he can just get easy baskets. We're having him out there on the floor more often and in more games residually is just going to provide a huge like weight off a lot of these young guards for Arkansas's back to just like if the possession's breaking down, throw it up to Zvonimir fucking Visage. He's huge. He's
You know,
massive and he can make plays. It's like if you put him in a bad situation, he's a more than savvy enough player to get out of it himself. He's not like these other bigs in the conference that are young, sophomores or younger, that if you put them in a bad spot with the ball in their hands, they're not going to be able to escape. They're not going to be able to navigate. They can't pass the ball. They can only pass the ball, 2 or 3 different ways. And like, that's what they're knowing, like their own habits. Zvonimir Visic doesn't really, he plays with so much creativity that he doesn't really have a ton of like, nervous or like breakdown habits that a lot of bigs that are young have. And it makes it really exciting as an evaluator to see him get another chance here at Arkansas to be a premier big man in college basketball. And I think he is going to be one of the premier big men in college basketball.
yeah, he is one for me where it's like some of the flashes that he shows are some of the most exciting flashes I've seen out of a big man prospect in college basketball in a long time.
Mhm.
Like
The
when
behind the
it's
back passes, the Chet Holmgren sequences where it's a block and a rebound and then the 3-point shot on the other end. Like those are the things that you want out of your 4 or 5s now. So it's like if he can give you that, I don't care if it's his second year and he's not like, 19 or 18. Like he's still worth drafting really high to me and developing. And if you can, he's another one of these guys like a Tyler Smith, a GG Jackson. If you can just get ahead of the curve on where all these other guys view him and, get him in a landing spot, early second round, even at the end of the year, even if he has this season we're talking about, he could still end up in that class of prospect. Like, like, teams still make mistakes and doubt some of these players that are a little bit like, out there. And he's definitely out there as a prospect, but he has the stability as a spacer, both vertically and from the 3-point line on offense that are just like premium in college basketball at 7'2". So I don't know. That's my Zvonimir Visage soapbox. And
I'm on
alongside, you have my other favorite player in the country, Adu Thiero, who I think is in himself is another like, impact player of the year candidate, who kind of aligns with like that Mark Sears frame of thinking where it's like, one of the better players on the better teams in the conference are, gonna win this award. But I don't think like Adu or a Visage are like the type of guys to put up those kind of numbers where Cam's making these arguments probably with Lanier and Robinson that these are going to be the highest leading scorers on these teams, and they're probably going to be top 5, 3 or 4 teams in the conference. Yeah, sum it up. Yeah,
Are you saying that's what I think? Because I think Lanier does a little more than just score, buddy. No, no, I think when I went Jackson and Chaz, I think Jackson takes a little more playmaking leaps than he has as far as responsibility, and then his team is just way better. So he's gonna have, you know, more freedom with the ball, and he's going to be able to pass to way better players. And I think he'll be their leading scorer just because he has the most on-ball juice and he has that movement shooting that they really gonna have to rely on. And obviously with Lanier, the same situation. They're gonna really need him to score, and I think he delivers with some of the three-level stuff he does. He's a super efficient three-point shooter as well as, you know, a very impressive secondary playmaker. So, I think that leads to a player of the year kind of production. I didn't want to go Broom or Sears because they're obviously probably going to be the ones to get it in real life just because their teams are going to be great and they're going to be amazing. So,
Yeah, who would make the obvious pick?
exactly.
Julian always makes the obvious picks. But it's fine because we all kind of made like obvious picks here with Coach of the Year, I think, to some extent. I think Mark Pope and Rick Barnes both did an exceptional job bringing in portal talent. I think that if either one of them end up knocking off Alabama, they're going to come home with National Coach of the Year probably. I think that
Sure.
that's very much in the cards for both of them. So yeah. Mike White, Buzz Williams, also both good nods of teams that are not very talented, but could turn out.
Doesn't Mike White coach Georgia though?
Well, yeah, but
Georgia's
I mean,
pretty
like
talented.
relative to what we've been talking about now, the last like 5 minutes instead of like the last hour. Have we talked
Speak.
about a Georgia player besides a freshman?
Yeah, that's
No.
what's crazy. There's not going to be any Georgia players in the.
Silas Damari, I think, would be maybe like a better nod over like AJ Hogard or like Otega Owe, but I just wanted to make sure those players are well represented.
Yeah, I want him my Vanderbilt love because they're
No,
not
I
getting
hear
any
you.
love.
But I think that there's some players on some of these other teams that could make runs, you know what I mean? Um, Solomon Washington's a guy that I want to give a nod for my defensive player of the year, Texas
That was a great
A&M.
one. Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
solid.
he's elite. And I think that he's gonna, again, a reason why they should be seen as one of the better and more stable teams in this conference. Cliff O'Meary, we've talked about and probably will have clipped up at some point in this episode. Um, Supremely talented big man and Energizer Bunny, easy pick for defensive player of the year unless it was Broom. You know what I mean? But Broom's just can move a little bit on the perimeter at times, but he's just like got the paint on a complete lockdown. And it's just, he's gonna have this numbers. He's gonna have the actual like rim presence as on Auburn. Like they're gonna scare people off. He's gonna win that award probably. And like Cam was saying, that in most cases, especially with a guy like him, if Auburn can surprise people, he could end up with the Player of the Year, especially if he's putting up easily a double class of a
Yeah.
season. Freshman of the year is kind of, all the guys that we've talked about. Trey Johnson, Carter Knox, Asa Newell are kind of like the three marquee names in terms of like guys with huge opportunities at their position. There's a lot of, big name guards coming in this conference that, are kind of missing the nod here, like Boogie Fland or Jeremiah Fears. But I think all of us like those guys, even Todd Pettiford, if, Auburn, like Cam was saying also when we're talking about Auburn, if they're not really looking to some of this veteran transfer talent and want to turn it over to a creative and freshman that has a lot of scoring juice, like that's more than a viable option. And he could definitely easily win freshman of the year.
Oh, Cam Scott is a huge dark horse for South Carolina. They don't
I
really
was
have much.
wondering. You didn't bring him up. I was wondering if you were going to bring him up on South
Yeah, it's
Carolina.
crazy. I forgot about him. I was thinking about Zach Davis the whole time, but yeah, they get Cam Scott. He's going to be in a big situation. They need some scoring and on that perimeter, and they're tired of letting Thomas do whatever he wants. And it's not like Davis killed it last year, so Scott could be a guy to monitor as far as a situation that could really blossom into some 25 minutes a game and some real scoring from a freshman.
100%. Most improved player, speaking of blossoming, I had Mohamed Diabate.
Zach.
No, I
Yeah.
just don't think it's like pronounced like that, you know what I mean? Um, and then Jarn Stevenson as well is my most improved players for Alabama. Um, I think that both of them are just going to take steps forward in terms of like kind of opposite of each other. I think Muhammad's going to be a better shooter, and a better spacer, and is already a dynamic defender and versatile plug and play player that he displayed last year in, kind of minor minutes. And I'll be interested to see as his role expands as a returner at Alabama. I think he could be really, really good next year because he is super athletic and can defend, 1 through 4. And obviously Jordan Stevenson, I think has like a low key dark horse, all conference caliber season in him if Grant Nelson left. You know what I mean? Like I think if Mark Sears and Grant Nelson leave, we're seeing a very, very different version of Jordan Stevenson lead this Alabama team. And uh, I don't know. I can say that I think it would be interesting, but both of these guys are better suited as being, most improved role players, in my opinion. I think that they are like the decider. These two are the decider of whether this team wins a national championship next year or not.
Jaron was my backup option, if that helps. I
Yeah,
know me and
Tyrell Ward's interesting in terms of like pure output, but
yeah, I think
same thing with Zach Davis. He's gonna have to. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
yeah,
Davis and Ward. I feel like they're just gonna have to.
I was
yeah,
thinking about more like these would be like the two most exciting jumps in the country. Like if one of these two jumps into like a big three status with Nelson and Sears, like even over, like one of these guys overleaps Cliff, like I think that that would be really cool in terms of like value and draft stock.
Not for
Uh,
sure.
yeah. Top recruiting
okay.
class, Alabama and Arkansas.
Yeah, no said.
I think there's also a case out there for Kentucky and Tennessee,
Yeah, it depends on how we grade recruiting. Because if we're talking about incoming freshmen,
which is what
um,
I was focusing on more. And
yeah, I was as
also,
well.
like, I was viewing like recruiting class in terms of like how where I valued recruits. You know what I mean? I think that they brought in a ton of transfers that I valued really highly, even if Kentucky maybe brought in the higher ranking ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, because I would say like Bama, Arkansas, from a bringing in underclassmen perspective, did a much better job than, Kentucky, Tennessee. But if we're talking just like, bringing in talent from other places, it's so close between those four teams.
Sure.
100%. I think Tennessee's probably, I don't know, I think maybe Tennessee's last in that, even though we got two top transfers for you guys. Just because
Yeah,
most of that juice comes from three players, where Kentucky,
yeah,
Arkansas, it's most of the roster, and then Alabama's freshmen are just so good.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, Kentucky's entire roster, 99% of Arkansas's roster. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's tough with the volume, but Tennessee had the quality, I think,
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
sure.
you definitely have the quality.
And I think that Kentucky has some stake to maybe some quality claims there with Jackson Robinson and Kobe Brea, and then my sleeper transfer, I think, in the entire conference, so I think could walk in and you know would have been at Oklahoma in the SEC, instead he's at Kentucky in the SEC, and is going to be one of the best perimeter defenders in the conference regardless, and a knockdown shooter, dynamic athlete, shot blocker at 6'5", second round grade right now. And I'll take it away.
Always a dog. Amari Williams too. Yeah, they killed the portal, man.
They definitely did, and we'll see how it works. I think that this is the year where we will truly see if the portal is the wave. And
Right.
this can, because it's like, okay, like
Full Sail.
gave the most prestigious program. Like, you know what I mean? It's like going on to like a video game and trying to test out like this theory, like, oh, I'll take the school with the highest prestige and we'll try out and see if the transfer portal actually works.
Yeah, this is
You know what I mean? Like Kentucky
Definitely.
has got
Yeah.
the freshman recruiting juice. They're the prep, like they're the one and done, you know what I mean? Like that's the factory. So
Yeah.
it's like It's weird. And seeing Cal just go to another team in the SEC, like I don't know. I would have liked to have seen him go to maybe like a school in the Big East. I think would have been fun, and would have like seen him juice up like a Big East um school. But Arkansas, Arrow. I mean, hell, I would have loved to have seen them out in California. Like it would have been cool to see Cal at USC.
Well, Musk took that job first, and
Yeah,
then
but still
well,
would have been.
Musk, and then he was like, "Oh, Arkansas is open. I'll go there."
Yeah.
Just weird. I would have loved to see him go to an even smaller
Shout
conference.
out Coach Muss. We'll see if I can get to a USC practice one of these days.
Must bus. Talk about him next week.
We'll talk about him next week. Talked about him today, Sunday, September 29th today, for the viewers.
The 30th now.
We talked about USC.
See, it's the 29th for you. For me and Cam, it's the 30th already.
Oh, look at you, a little late night podcast.
Yeah, we're ahead of schedule, brother.
No, we're cooking. We're cooking. Dark horse to win the conference, y'all. Or I guess we could talk about team to beat. What's your guys' argument for? I have an interesting one with Kentucky. Alabama's obviously like our unanimous team to like, win the conference. But what it like makes them like the team that, any of these teams are walking out and being like, okay, that could have made our season by beating Alabama. What about Alabama makes them that way? Is it Mark Sears? Is it the depth? Is it the overall pedigree, versatility of the roster? What is it? All
They
of it
have all of
combined.
it.
Yeah.
They just have all of it. Like
Got it all. You need
you
returners. They
name
got
it.
returners. They need freshmen. You brought in freshmen. You need size. They have plenty of size. NBA talent. Plenty of NBA talent. They just checked all the boxes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's probably the most complete team in college basketball. You name a skill, they have multiple players that accomplish that skill in multiple areas of the floor. And they've got, you know, they've got players that are probably not going to get minutes this year that would not just start, but be the number one option on other teams. Like we talked about it with a Den Holloway. They're probably going to just hide him on their bench so Auburn can't have him. It's one of the more ridiculous collections of talent that I've probably ever seen in college basketball. And I just watched a team win back-to-back national championships.
Yeah, 100%. I think Kentucky, though, has an interesting argument to be the team to beat at home. I think that this team defensively is going to be really, 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 really difficult to beat in Lexington. Like I don't think you're going in Kentucky and winning a lot of games and the SEC out of conference regardless. And that was kind of the argument wanted to make for them is, you know, a lot of as much as, basketball or individual contests, the setting matters and, the crowd and, your comfortability matters in terms of especially shooting. And there's a lot of shooting in this conference, but a lot of these teams have like three or four shooters and like then they kind of opt for size on the interior to compete in the SEC. I think it'll be interesting to see if this Kentucky team that has six or seven shooters can outlast some of these teams in their own arena with some of their perimeter defense and versatility. And I think that can make them a really, really interesting team to beat at home. And that was kind of one of my niche takes of the day.
I
I
like
agree.
it.
Their defenses could be possibly elite. So that's going to be, and then they have the movement shooting and some of the scoring. So it could get weird for a lot of teams in the SEC.
I think Georgia's a young team that could go in there and make some noise because they have some real like punch on defense
Right.
and they have guys who are like big moment getters, you know what I mean? Like
Facts.
I think Damari and Kane seek that, you know what I mean? I think that like they'd like going in there and I think Noah would feed off that energy of playing against a big school like that in a big environment. Um
I could see Arkansas
I could see Arkansas
transition running them out of the building type
100%
stuff.
just dunking all over them.
Just
Yeah. NBA
that,
athleticism everywhere. Yeah.
that
But I
typical
mean,
like Cal.
Garrison and Williams definitely beef up what's looking like, a rather like less than NBA caliber athleticism roster that for Kentucky. They beef it up for sure. So I'll be interested to see Tennessee going in there. I don't think it's gonna win.
Bold take.
It'll be interesting.
Keystone Dubar dropping 25 and 10.
I think that they'd probably could bully him. I mean, I don't know. Andrew Carr is gonna have a good night.
His face-up game is crazy. Don't sleep on my boy.
He's a beast. He's
My
like that chip off. He's that chip off the old block of those 6'9" power forwards. So you know what I mean. It's I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm excited, man. I'm super excited for these Power 5 games.
This SEC is also going to be so much fun. I think like for two reasons. One, like this is kind of like my little wrap up at the end.
Go ahead. We kind of went through each of our dark horses throughout the video anyway.
Yeah. My like the reason I love this SEC more than I think most years is I think it's the first time where I could see multiple SEC teams, like going into the season where I could see multiple SEC teams making deep tournament runs. Like it's going to be a grind fest. It's going to be a slugfest. But I don't think like the Big Ten has this issue most seasons where it's a grind fest, it's a slugfest.
But
All
most
the
of
Big Ten teams,
stink.
most of the teams get to the tournament and get upset by the end of the first weekend. I don't think that that's going to be a thing with these SEC teams. I would not be surprised if you saw 3 or 4 SEC teams in the Sweet 16. I would not be surprised if you saw any 2 of Kentucky, Alabama, Arkansas, or Tennessee in the Elite Eight this year. Would not shock me in the slightest.
Facts.
No, you're on point. You're on point. I think that there's this. The Big 12 is definitely a lot deeper. Because at like 8 or 9, at like 6 or 7, it really falls off here in terms of like having like that 9-10 man rotation of contributors. Where I think the Big 12 had that all across the board. I think there's a lot of freshman talent in this conference, but not as much as maybe years past, as where we'll talk about the ACC and the Big Ten coming up, where I think that they have some juice in terms of top names. We'll be talking Rutgers. We'll be talking top 5 potential picks next episode.
Yeah.
Which is a first for us on the pod this year.
Yeah, we talked about a single. How many lottery picks have we talked about in these first 2?
I think Ace is a lottery pick for me.
Trey Johnson.
Trey Johnson's a lottery pick. I think in
Right.
the Big 12, there's a lot of guys that are borderline. You know what I mean?
I've got Carter in my lottery.
Yeah, Carter, Boogie Flan would be borderline. Guys like that's really about it. Too,
See?
Igor, we talked about Igor and VJ.
We did talk about VJ.
And Igor as both lottery guys.
Igor, and then
Igor. I was thinking Igor Milicic, not Igor Demir.
Yeah.
No, we talked about Demon and VJ, who I both have top 5 on my board.
I could see that. Yeah, those are lottery. So we've talked through 5, 6 lottery picks. 4 of them lottery. 2 or 3 of them lottery.
Zvonimir and Visic.
Could be lottery.
Yeah. I could see what's his face? Grant Nelson.
Could see Grant Nelson.
Wait, making some waves because of his archetype.
Yeah.
I don't know. If Grant Nelson was all of a sudden like a Franz Wagner-esque lottery pick, I would freak.
No, I just mean like first round, like, and then yeah.
Top 20.
That's way too rich for my blood.
He could get there.
That's old though. He's old though.
Never
You
mind.
ain't gotta go. You don't really gotta go old this year. You don't have to.
That's true.
You can go young this year.
You can go pretty young this year.
Just be careful.
I wouldn't be surprised if most.
Just be careful.
Come on, Drake.
I wouldn't be surprised if most of the guys drafted in the first round this year are under 20.
Yeah. Over under 20 guys under 20 this year.
It's definitely gonna be more.
Gonna
Last
be
year
hard.
I think it was around there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're way more talented this year.
Yeah.
Well, tune in next time for what's going to be the start of us talking about how stacked this freshman class is, because I think that's kind of the conversation that we're going to have when we talk about some of these Big Ten teams next week.
Yeah, 100%. We'll have the Big Ten. I think we'll also record probably the ACC in the same sitting.
Yeah.
You have those to look forward to. And then the last week we'll have the Big East, and then we'll have a follow-up week of kind of a hodgepodge of the rest of the country of our favorite handpicked conferences, and which will most likely include a lot of our own handpicked favorite players, and probably like we do like a version of like our top 20 mid-major or non-power five teams. You know what I mean? So I think that'll be super fun, and an enjoyable way to kick off college basketball. And then, make sure to follow, subscribe, because once the season kicks off, you get us every week breaking down the previous week's action. So you're not going to want to miss it. Um, Obviously, we've been sitting here talking for a couple hours. We know our stuff. Go follow us on Twitter. All of our links are in the description. Go check out Cerebral Sports. Um, all the shit.
Go Owls.
We're off the clock.